Dr. Blue stood at the viewport of his medical shuttle, his four eyes blinking in sequence as he watched the human military base grow larger. The dusty brown planet below wasn't much to look at, but it was about to become his home for the next 6 months. His upper arms held his medical tablet while his lower ones adjusted his pristine white coat, a habit he had when nervous. "Landing in 5 minutes, Doctor," the pilot called out. "Human command has cleared us for arrival." The medical officer nodded, though his gray skin had taken on a slightly paler shade. He had treated many species in his 20 years as a Galactic Federation doctor. But humans were different. The reports he'd read about them seemed impossible. Some claimed they could continue fighting with multiple fractures. Others suggested they could survive losing large amounts of blood. One particularly unbelievable report stated that a human had continued running after a complete leg muscle tear. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thud. Through the viewport, Dr. Blue could see a group of humans waiting on the landing pad. They stood straight and tall, wearing their brown and green camouflage uniforms, and despite the planet's scorching 40-degree heat, they didn't seem bothered. "Remarkable," he muttered, noting how they weren't using any cooling equipment. Most species would need environmental suits in this heat. As he stepped out of the shuttle, the hot air hit him like a physical force. His environmental regulator immediately whirred to life, working to keep his body temperature stable. A human with officer insignia stepped forward. "Welcome to Forward Operating Base Thunder, Dr. Blue. I'm Captain Miller." The human extended a hand, and Dr. Blue carefully shook it, remembering his briefing about human greeting customs. The strength in that simple handshake surprised him. "Thank you, Captain. I look forward to working with your unit." Dr. Blue tried to hide his fascination as he noticed the captain's scars, evidence of previous injuries that had healed naturally without regeneration treatment. "Let me show you to the medical bay. We've set up a special section for your research." Captain Miller gestured toward a large concrete building. "You'll be working alongside our medical team. They're excited to learn from you, and I hope you'll find their methods interesting." As they walked, Dr. Blue observed the base's activity. Humans were everywhere, carrying heavy equipment without exo-assist suits, running in the hot sun without cooling systems, and eating food that his scanners indicated contained numerous toxic compounds. His medical training told him half of what he was seeing should be impossible. The medical bay was a surprise. Instead of the advanced healing pods and regeneration chambers he was used to, he saw simple beds, basic monitoring equipment, and cabinets full of what appeared to be primitive chemical medicines. A human medic was wrapping a soldier's injured arm with fabric bandages instead of using a tissue knitter. "I know it's not what you're used to," Captain Miller said, noticing his expression, "but it works for us. Humans tend to heal better with some things done the old-fashioned way." Dr. Blue's tablet beeped as it recorded elevated vital signs from a soldier on a nearby bed. The human was reading something on a small device, seeming completely relaxed despite having injuries that Dr. Blue's scanner indicated would be extremely painful. "Your first patients are scheduled for tomorrow morning," Captain Miller continued. "We got some routine checkups and a couple of post-injury assessments. Should give you a good baseline for your research." Dr. Blue nodded, but his attention was on a soldier who had just walked in. The human's medical file popped up on his tablet. 3 weeks ago, this soldier had broken 2 ribs. Now they were carrying a heavy pack and moving as if they'd never been injured. As Captain Miller left him to settle in, Dr. Blue began setting up his equipment. His report to the Galactic Federation Medical Council was supposed to be a simple evaluation of human medical practices. But already he could tell it would be much more than that. These humans were going to change everything he thought he knew about biology and medicine. He had a feeling the next 6 months were going to be very interesting indeed. Dr. Blue woke up to the sound of boots hitting the ground and humans shouting. He checked his time display. 500 hours. Peering through his window, he saw something that made all 4 of his eyes widen. The entire human unit was running in formation, carrying heavy packs in the pre-dawn darkness. He quickly grabbed his tablet and began recording observations. Day 3 at Forward Operating Base Thunder. He spoke into his medical log. Humans begin physical activity before their sun rises. Temperature, 15 degrees. Most species would still be in sleep cycle at this hour. Dr. Blue rushed to get dressed. By the time he reached the training area, the soldiers were doing what they called push-ups. Their bodies moved up and down in perfect sync, muscles working against gravity. His scanner showed their heart rates elevated but stable. Fascinating, he muttered, noting how some soldiers had been doing this for 20 minutes without rest. Their muscle endurance exceeds all known parameters. Morning, Doc, called Staff Sergeant Jones, the unit's senior medic. She was covered in sweat but smiling. Want to join us for PT? Dr. Blue politely declined, still recording data. How often do you perform these exercises? Every morning, she replied, dropping down to do more push-ups while talking. This is just the warm-up. We've got a 10-mile run after this. His tablet nearly slipped from his lower hands. 10 miles. In this gravity. Later that morning, in the mess hall, Dr. Blue observed another remarkable phenomenon. The humans were eating their breakfast with enthusiasm, despite his scanners showing the presence of capsaicin, caffeine, and other compounds that would be considered dangerous stimulants on most worlds. Staff Sergeant, he called to Jones, who was eating something called hot sauce on her eggs. Are you aware that your condiment contains enough capsaicin to incapacitate a Rigelian war beast? She laughed. This is the mild stuff. You should see what Lieutenant Thompson puts on his food. Dr. Blue spent the afternoon in the medical bay, treating minor injuries from training. A young soldier came in with a sprained ankle. Instead of asking for pain suppressors, she simply requested something called an ice pack and a compression bandage. You don't want proper medical treatment? He asked, holding up his tissue regenerator. Nod, Doc. It'll heal stronger on its own. Besides, I've got patrol tomorrow. He watched in disbelief as she limped out, putting weight on the injured foot despite what his scans told him must be significant pain. He added another note to his growing list of observations about human pain tolerance. The evening brought more surprises. Despite the physical exertion of their PT session and a full day of duties, many humans were still active. Some were lifting weights in the exercise area. Others were running additional laps around the base perimeter, and a group was practicing hand-to-hand combat techniques. Don't they need to rest? He asked Captain Miller, who was checking the duty roster. They're actually taking it easy today, Miller replied. You should see them when we're doing full combat drills. As Dr. Blue prepared for sleep that night, he reviewed his day's notes. The humans had performed physical feats that would exhaust most species, consumed substances that should be toxic, ignored pain that would incapacitate others, and seemed to grow stronger from activities that should wear them down. His medical training told him that the human's behavior should be leading to massive systemic failures. Instead, his scans showed improved muscle density, strengthened immune responses, and increased bone density. Everything he knew about biology said this was impossible. Just before turning off his tablet, he added one final note. Initial hypothesis: humans don't just survive hardship, they thrive on it. Further investigation needed to understand how this is possible. Current medical knowledge may need significant revision. The next morning, he woke up early. He had a feeling he was going to need every minute of observation time he could get. The morning started like any other at Forward Operating Base Thunder, with Dr. Blue recording his observations of the humans' morning exercises. That was until the base alarm started blaring. All combat units, gear up. Hostile contact reported in Sector 7. The announcement echoed across the base. Dr. Blue watched in amazement as the exercising soldiers instantly switched from their training routine to combat readiness. Doctor, grab your med kit, Staff Sergeant Jones called out as she ran past. We've got a patrol under fire. You wanted to see humans in action. Well, here's your chance. Dr. Blue quickly gathered his advanced medical equipment, his 4 hands working simultaneously to pack everything he might need. By the time he reached the vehicle bay, the rescue team was already mounting up in their armored vehicles. "Stay close to me, Doc," Jones said as she helped him into the transport. "And remember your combat training." The ride was rough, bouncing across the planet's rocky terrain. Dr. Blue checked his environmental regulator. The temperature outside had risen to 45 degrees. He looked at the human soldiers in the vehicle, noting how they seemed unbothered by the heat despite wearing full combat gear. They heard the gunfire before they saw it. The patrol had been ambushed in a narrow valley, pinned down by enemy forces on the ridgeline. As their vehicle skidded to a stop, Dr. Blue's scanner picked up multiple human life signs and several injury markers. "Medic." The call came from behind a cluster of rocks. Dr. Blue followed Jones as she rushed forward, staying low as energy bolts sizzled through the air above them. Behind the rocks, they found Private Cooper. A piece of shrapnel had torn through his leg, and Dr. Blue's scanner showed severe tissue damage and blood loss. To the alien doctor's shock, Cooper was still firing his weapon at the enemy physician. "Cooper, stop moving. You're making the bleeding worse." Dr. Blue tried to hold him still with his lower arms while preparing a tissue regenerator with his upper ones. "Can't stop, Doc," Cooper grunted. "I've got the best angle on their left flank. Just patch me up enough to keep shooting." Jones was already wrapping the wound with a pressure bandage. "Traditional treatment, Doc. We can do the fancy stuff later. He needs to stay in the fight." Dr. Blue wanted to argue. This went against every medical principle he knew. But he helped Jones stabilize the wound, watching in disbelief as Cooper immediately resumed his defensive position. The firefight intensified. More wounded soldiers were brought to their position. Dr. Blue worked frantically, amazed at how each injured human refused to stop fighting unless physically unable to continue. His scanner showed their bodies flooding with adrenaline and other chemicals that should have put them into shock. Instead, they seemed to become more focused, more determined. "Multiple fractures in your ribs," he told Sergeant Williams as he examined her injury. "You should be experiencing extreme pain." "Pain's just weakness leaving the body, Doc," she replied, checking her weapon's ammunition. "Besides, the others need me." The battle lasted another hour. When reinforcements finally arrived to drive off the attackers, Dr. Blue had treated 13 wounded soldiers. His medical log was full of impossible readings. Humans fighting with broken bones, continuing despite blood loss, ignoring injuries that should have been incapacitating. Back at the base, as he helped treat the wounded in the medical bay, Dr. Blue made a striking observation. The humans weren't just surviving their injuries. They were supporting each other, checking on their wounded comrades, refusing treatment until others were seen to first. "I don't understand," he said to Jones as they finished treating the last patient. "How do you do it? How do you keep fighting with such severe injuries?" Jones looked at him seriously. "Because we have to, Doc. Because our friends depend on us. Humans don't give up when things get tough. We get tougher." That night, Dr. Blue added a new note to his research log. Human physical resilience cannot be understood through biological factors alone. Their social bonds and psychological determination seem to unlock capabilities that defy medical science. Further research is essential to understand this phenomenon. He looked at the recovering soldiers in the medical bay, realizing he had only begun to scratch the surface of understanding human potential. 2 weeks after the firefight, Dr. Blue sat in his makeshift laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays of human medical data. He hadn't slept in 3 days, normal for his species when pursuing important research. The images floating around him told a story that defied everything he had learned in medical school. "Computer, display Private Cooper's leg injury again," he commanded. The hologram showed the healing progression of the soldier's wound. "Magnify cellular structure." What he saw made him lean forward in excitement. The human tissue wasn't just healing, it was becoming stronger. The muscle fibers were knitting together more densely than before, the bone was reforming with higher calcium density, and even the skin was becoming tougher. "Doctor?" Staff Sergeant Jones knocked on his door. You wanted to see my old medical files. Yes, yes. Come in. All four of his eyes brightened as Jones handed him her medical tablet. You mentioned being shot 3 years ago. Jones pulled up her shirt slightly, showing a scar on her side. Right here. Spent 2 weeks recovering, then went right back to full duty. Dr. Blue scanned the scar tissue, adding the data to his growing collection. Remarkable. The healed tissue is 40% stronger than the surrounding area. Your body didn't just repair the damage, it improved the structure. He pulled up more files on his screens, broken bones that had healed stronger, torn muscles that had regrown denser, even brain scans showing enhanced neural pathways around old injury sites. Every injury these humans survived seemed to make them more resilient. Tell me about your training, he asked Jones while his lower hands typed rapidly. Why do you deliberately stress your bodies to the point of micro-injury? You mean working out? Jones smiled. That's how we get stronger. Break down the muscle, let it heal back better. Same principle applies to most things. Stress makes us tougher. Dr. Blue's fingers danced across his console, pulling up comparison scans. Look at this, he pointed to 2 brain scans. This soldier before and after experiencing combat stress. The neural pathways have actually multiplied. The stress response triggered growth instead of damage. He brought up more data. Hormone levels during battle, cellular regeneration rates, bone density comparisons. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans didn't just heal from injuries. They adapted to them, improved from them, became better equipped to handle similar stresses in the future. Your entire species, he muttered. You're all like this. You actively seek out stress to trigger improvement. Jones laughed. We call it training or exercise. But yeah, that's the basic idea. Why do you think we run every morning? Or do combat drills? Or eat spicy food? We're constantly pushing our limits. Dr. Blue pulled up the Galactic Federation's standard species classification guidelines. According to every metric they used, humans should be classified as a developing species. Their technology wasn't particularly advanced, their lifespans were relatively short, and they hadn't even colonized their entire home planet before reaching space. But their biology told a different story. Their adaptive capabilities exceeded anything in the database. Their ability to become stronger through stress and injury wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. Computer, begin recording, Dr. Blue announced. Preliminary findings on human cellular regeneration and stress response. Subject species demonstrates unique ability to convert environmental stressors into biological improvements. Recommendation: immediate reclassification of human biological capability rating. He looked at Jones, who was curiously examining one of his holographic displays. Your bodies aren't just resilient, he said. They're continuously evolving, adapting, improving. Every challenge you survive makes you better equipped for the next one. Isn't that normal? Jones asked. No, Dr. Blue replied, his voice filled with wonder. No, it's not normal at all. It's extraordinary. And I have a feeling the Galactic Federation isn't going to believe what I'm about to tell them about your species. He turned back to his research, knowing he had only begun to understand the remarkable beings called humans. The attack came at midnight. Dr. Blue was analyzing tissue samples when the base's perimeter alarms screamed to life. The sound of heavy weapons fire filled the air, and his sensitive ears picked up the rumble of approaching vehicles. All personnel, battle stations. This is not a drill. Captain Miller's voice boomed over the base's speakers. Enemy forces approaching from multiple directions. Medical team, prepare for casualties. Dr. Blue rushed to the medical bay, all 4 arms carrying different pieces of equipment. Staff Sergeant Jones was already there, setting up triage stations. The walls shook from nearby explosions. They hit our sensor grid first, Jones explained as she checked medical supplies. Must have been planning this for weeks. Hope you're ready for some real action, Doc. The first casualties arrived within minutes. Dr. Blue worked frantically alongside the human medics, amazed at their ability to stay focused despite the chaos around them. The base's defenses were holding, but the attackers had superior numbers. Direct hit on the east wall, someone shouted. They're breaking through. Dr. Blue looked up from treating a plasma burn to see Captain Miller organizing the defense. Even with a bleeding head wound, the captain was calmly directing troops and coordinating with artillery. "Doctor, we need you," Jones called from across the room. A soldier had been caught in an explosion. Dr. Blue's scanner showed massive internal injuries, but incredibly, the human was still conscious and trying to get back to his unit. "You must stay still," Dr. Blue insisted, using his lower arms to hold the soldier down while his upper arms operated his medical equipment. "Your injuries are severe. My squad needs me," the soldier argued, attempting to sit up. "Just give me something for the pain. I can still fight." Dr. Blue watched in astonishment as Jones administered a simple chemical painkiller, and the soldier actually got back to his feet. His scanner showed the human's body flooding with natural stimulants, somehow keeping him functional despite injuries that should have been fatal. The battle intensified. The medical bay filled with wounded, but Dr. Blue noticed something extraordinary. The less severely injured humans were treating themselves, applying basic first aid so the medical team could focus on critical cases. They were organizing themselves, adapting to the situation, becoming more efficient under pressure. A massive explosion rocked the building. Part of the ceiling collapsed, blocking the main entrance. Without hesitation, the walking wounded formed a line, passing supplies and stretchers through a narrow gap. Their coordination was perfect, despite none of them having trained for this specific situation. "How are they doing this?" Dr. Blue asked Jones as they worked together to stabilize a critically injured soldier. "There's no command structure, no pre-planned protocol, yet they're working together perfectly." "It's what humans do," Jones replied, her hand steady as she inserted an IV line. "We adapt. We overcome. We look out for each other." The fighting continued for hours. Dr. Blue lost track of time, moving from patient to patient. His scanner recorded impossible data. Humans fighting with punctured lungs, running on broken legs, continuing to give orders despite severe concussions. Their bodies were pushing far beyond normal biological limits. Finally, as dawn approached, the attack was repelled. The medical bay was crowded with wounded, but not a single human had given up or abandoned their post. Even the seriously injured were asking about their comrades, offering encouragement, sharing water and supplies. Dr. Blue sat down heavily, exhausted but unable to stop watching the humans around him. In the face of overwhelming odds, they hadn't just survived. They had become stronger, more organized, more effective. His medical training told him this should be impossible, yet he had witnessed it with all four of his eyes. "Computer," he spoke quietly, "update research notes. Human response to extreme stress appears to extend beyond individual adaptation. They display collective improvement under pressure, suggesting a species-wide trait that defies current medical understanding." He looked at the recovering soldiers, knowing that this battle had shown him something that would change galactic medicine forever. The day after the major battle, Dr. Blue sat in his laboratory, surrounded by blood samples from the wounded soldiers. His four eyes hadn't blinked in hours as he stared at the holographic displays, trying to understand what he was seeing. "This can't be right," he muttered, running the tests again. "Computer, reanalyze blood sample from subject Cooper, taken during combat." The results came back the same. The human's blood contained compounds that matched the chemical structure of combat stimulants used by other species. But these weren't artificial. They were naturally produced by the human body. "Staff Sergeant Jones," he called over the base's communication system, "could you come to the lab immediately? And bring Captain Miller if possible." Both humans arrived quickly, still showing signs of yesterday's battle. Miller's head wound was bandaged, and Jones moved with a slight limp. Yet both were fully alert and functional. "What's so urgent, Doc?" Miller asked, noticing the excited way Dr. Blue's lower arms were tapping on his console. Look at this, Dr. Blue pointed to the holographic display. This is the chemical compound used in standard military combat stims across the galaxy. And this, he pulled up another image, is what I found in Private Cooper's blood during the battle. Jones leaned closer. They look identical. Exactly. All four of Dr. Blue's arms gestured enthusiastically. Your bodies produce these compounds naturally. What other species need to inject artificially, you create on your own. And not just one or two compounds, dozens of them. He brought up more displays, showing complex molecular structures. Adrenaline, norepinephrine, endorphins, cortisol. Your bodies produce an entire suite of combat enhancement chemicals, and they're more pure, more effective than anything we can synthesize. Miller looked confused. Doc, these are just normal stress hormones. Every human produces them. Normal. Dr. Blue's voice rose with excitement. Captain, there's nothing normal about this. Do you understand what this means? The most advanced combat enhancement drugs in the galaxy are just pale imitations of what your bodies produce naturally. He pulled up combat footage from his medical scanner, showing soldiers during yesterday's battle. Look at this. When Private Cooper was injured, his body released natural painkillers stronger than our best medical analgesics. When Sergeant Williams was cornered, her muscle efficiency increased by 40% from her own chemical production. That's just the fight or flight response, Jones said. Basic human biology. No. Dr. Blue's hands flew over his controls, bringing up more data. It's far more than that. Your bodies don't just produce these chemicals. They produce the exact right combinations at the exact right times. You automatically adjust the dosage based on the situation. You even develop resistance to your own compounds to prevent overdose. He showed them more test results. And it gets better. Your bodies learn from each exposure. The more stress you face, the more efficient your production becomes. You literally get better at producing combat enhancement chemicals through experience. It's an adaptive response we've never seen in any other species. Miller and Jones exchanged looks. To them, this was just how bodies worked. They had no idea how extraordinary it was. The combat stims other species use. Dr. Blue continued. They're addictive. They cause organ damage. They require careful dosing. But your natural compounds, they're perfectly calibrated. They have built-in safeguards. They even help you heal afterwards. He saved all his data, adding it to his growing research file. This discovery changes everything. The Galactic Federation's entire approach to combat medicine is based on artificially replicating what your bodies do naturally. Every super soldier program in the galaxy is just trying to copy what comes standard in human biology. He looked at the two humans with all four eyes wide in wonder. You're not just resilient. You're not just adaptable. You're literally built for combat in ways we never imagined possible. Miller and Jones just nodded politely, still not fully grasping how their normal biology had just revolutionized galactic military medicine. Dr. Blue stood before the Galactic Federation Medical Council, his formal white coat pristine, all four hands steady as he operated the holographic controls. The chamber was filled with the most respected medical minds in the galaxy, all gathered to hear his findings about humans. Distinguished members of the council, he began. 6 months ago, I departed for Forward Operating Base Thunder with a simple mission: to observe and document human medical practices. What I discovered will change our understanding of biology forever. He brought up the first hologram, a recording of Private Cooper fighting with a severe leg wound. The council members stirred in their seats, multiple eyes widening and tentacles twitching. This is not an isolated incident, Dr. Blue continued. During my study, I documented 473 cases of humans exceeding our established biological limits. But more importantly, I discovered why they can do this. His next display showed the chemical analysis that had amazed him so much. These compounds are identical to our most advanced combat stimulants, yet humans produce them naturally, in perfect combinations with no side effects. Their bodies are literally organic combat enhancement factories. The Council's chief medical officer leaned forward. Are you suggesting we reclassify humans as a combat-evolved species? No, Dr. Blue replied firmly. I am suggesting we create an entirely new classification. Humans don't just evolve for combat. They evolve through combat, through any kind of stress or challenge. Look at this data. He showed training records from the base. Their standard exercise routines would kill most species. Instead, it makes them stronger. Their bodies don't just repair damage. They improve from it. Even their social structures enhance their capabilities. The display changed to footage from the major battle. Notice how they organize instinctively under pressure, how they become more efficient in crisis. Their adaptability isn't just physical, it's psychological, social, and tactical. One council member raised a tentacle, but they're so primitive. They barely have interstellar travel. Their technology is centuries behind ours. With respect, Dr. Blue countered, I believe we've been measuring the wrong things. He brought up the current species classification guidelines. We judge advancement by technology, by lifespan, by population size. But humans, they have something far more valuable, unlimited potential for growth. He showed more battle footage. Look at how they work together, how they refuse to abandon each other. Their unit cohesion isn't enforced by hierarchy or training. It's instinctive. They form bonds under stress that make them stronger as a group than they are as individuals. The council chamber filled with murmurs as Dr. Blue presented his final findings. Every other species in the galaxy has limits, points beyond which they cannot improve. Humans don't. Every challenge they survive makes them better equipped for the next one. Their potential for adaptation appears to be unlimited. He straightened to his full height, looking at each council member in turn. I recommend an immediate reclassification of humans as an apex adaptable species. Their natural biological capabilities exceed our most advanced medical enhancements. Their potential for growth surpasses anything we've encountered. And most importantly, they do all of this without losing their compassion or their drive to protect others. The chief medical officer was silent for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. Your evidence is compelling, Dr. Blue. But if we accept your findings, it would mean rewriting our entire understanding of biological potential. Yes, Dr. Blue agreed. That's exactly what it means, and I suggest we start immediately, before humans rewrite it for us. He thought about the soldiers he left behind at Forward Operating Base Thunder. By now, they would be stronger than when he'd left them. Better trained, more resilient, and somewhere on their world, other humans were pushing other limits, finding new ways to adapt and improve. The question isn't whether humans will reach their full potential, he concluded. The question is whether we'll be ready when they do. The council voted unanimously to accept his recommendations. As Dr. Blue left the chamber, he smiled, knowing that the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again.